Welcome to the second session of YH Next Gen's education series, Empowering the Next Generation of Caregivers. If you didn't tune into session one, I won't hold it against you, but I will introduce myself, YH Next Gen, and Yi Hong. My name is Vanessa Hui, and I'm one of the founding members of YH Next Gen. And so YH Next Gen is a community that was just created this year with a few specific goals in mind. So first of all, we wanted to provide opportunities for next gens to give back to their loved ones and to the broader community. We also wanted to provide next gens with education and support as they navigate their present or their future roles as caregivers. And we also wanted to celebrate and support Yi Hong. If you're unfamiliar with Yi Hong is a nonprofit senior care organization based in the GTA, and it specializes in providing culturally and linguistically appropriate care to seniors of Chinese descent, as well as other ethnic backgrounds, including South Asian community, Japanese, Vietnamese, Korean, and Filipino. I'm very proud to highlight that Yi Hong has just recently launched we haven't launched officially yet, but set the largest fundraising goal in the history of the Chinese Canadian community. And that goal is to raise $80 million to double our existing long-term care capacity by building 800 beds across 3 new centers. This will reduce Yi Hong's current wait times, which can be as long as 10 years. And this is obviously a stark contrast to the provincial average wait times of 152 days. So I'm actually one of the Capital Campaign co-chairs. So please reach out to me if you're interested in learning more about Yi Hong or getting involved with YH Next Gen. You can find me on LinkedIn or through the YH Next Gen email address, which is on our website. And I'm so happy that a few of you actually did reach out after session one, and I hope to connect with more of you after today. So let's get started. Our first session was all about conversations around seniors care planning and preferences, why they should happen, what they should be about, and how to have them. And so today we are moving beyond conversations and into actually talking about what services are out there for family members who have a certain need and how these services can be accessed. All the unknowns and the decisions, it can be pretty overwhelming. So I hope that by the end of this hour, everyone can walk away just feeling a bit more confident about how to talk about the senior space and just feeling a little bit more knowledgeable about the landscape out there. With that said, I'd like to introduce our 3 panelists who are going to help us with that today. First, I want to introduce Dr. San Ng. And so San is the current CEO of Yi Hong, and she not only brings her experience from being very involved with Yi Hong on board positions in her current chair to today, but she also brings her experience as a management consultant who has advised different healthcare companies and companies in the social services sector. So thank you, San, for joining us. San's calling from a hotel in Winnipeg right now, so thank you. Next, we have Diane Duncan. And so Diane is the Executive Director of Seniors Persons Living Connected, which offers a range of care and support that enables aging at home for thousands of seniors. And we'll talk about what aging at home means today. I'm very grateful that Diane can join us today to provide that perspective on aging at home and some of the community-based services that are out there. And last but not least, we have Melody Lowe, who's joining us. And Melody is Senior Vice President at RFA Capital, a private equity firm that, among other things, specializes in seniors living. And Melody's journey with Yi Hong first began because Yi Hong actually cared for her mother. And from there, Melody joined many boards at Yi Hong, is now a member of the board of the foundation and also our newly launched retirement arm, Yi Hong Seniors Living. So thank you guys for joining us today. And actually, before we jump in, I want to invite all of our attendees to join me in asking questions of our panelists by using the Q&A window at the bottom of your screen. Just to let you know, you can submit them anonymously and only myself and the panelists can see them. So please don't be shy. Okay, so San, I'm going to start with you today. Our session is titled Continuum of Care. What services are available for your loved ones? So a good place to start is probably explaining what the continuum of care refers to. And, I know Yihong prides itself in providing services to seniors across the whole continuum of care. So perhaps you can, speak about the continuum of care using Yihong's services as an illustration.
Absolutely. Thank you. Happy to be here. So before jumping into the continuum of care, I just wanted to maybe touch on the goal that we're all aspiring to is to have the highest quality of life for seniors, caregivers, and their families, no matter what stage of life they are in, where they live, and what they like to do. And so with that, the whole idea around a continuum of care is to provide flexibility and choice for seniors and their loved ones to choose from, and not to say that, oh, we only have limited options, this is what you must have, or there's nothing else. So all of us on this call, and Diane can speak to this more, is that we're always looking to build out that continuum of care more, because we're learning that people are wanting new and different things. And it's all about engaging and supporting individuals to have the life that they want to have. So with that, maybe I'll start from the beginning in terms of, individuals who have turned 65 or potentially are even younger. So many individuals who have physical disabilities or cognitive disabilities can actually age earlier. And so even though, the normal definition of seniors is age 65, oftentimes people accessing services are much younger. It could be 55 or even younger. So sometimes in these service delivery options, you'll see younger people. And that's why it's really important to be sensitive to, not only thinking about people in terms of their age, but in terms of, what they like to do, their lifestyles and all of that. So on the I'll call it the left end of the continuum is, individuals who are aging well in their own homes and maybe even prefer to stay in their own homes. They're still fairly active, but maybe, because they're people are passing on in terms of their circle of friends, or they have, children who are working full time and don't have a lot of time to spend with them, is that oftentimes they can be socially isolated. And so there's all sorts of programs for active seniors to come out, to get exercise, to interact, to do arts, to, really, it's almost like a community where, you can come and meet other people and feel really included and, have new friendships and develop new interests and all of that. So there's a lot of those kinds of programs where people come together. They often go to a location to meet up, or they might do trips together or whatnot. And so there's a whole range of these active seniors programs. Now, when individuals get a little bit more frail and they're unable to maybe leave their homes as much, but they're still doing fairly well at home, they might have in-home supports. So you might start having someone come out to do homemaking or housekeeping, right? You might have someone through Meals on Wheels coming out to deliver meals to you. Hot meals so that you don't need to cook anymore. You might have other kinds of outreach supports, which we call, home and community support services. So a nurse might visit you, a doctor might visit you, and or you might have friendly visiting, right? Someone from an agency could come and say hi to your grandmother or grandfather and just check in. How are they doing? Do they need anything? And all of that. So there's also grocery shopping and all of those things. So there's in-home supports as well. Now, when it gets to the point where seniors can't really maintain their homes anymore, there's a whole variety of options for them to consider. And I think maybe Melody could expand on the range of housing options, but there's different kinds of supports within those as well, different levels of supports and all of that. And it even gets to personal supports whereby you need help getting dressed, eating and all of that. And eventually, when the individual's no longer able to stay home, either by themselves or with their spouses, then really considering other seniors housing options and going into buildings where there's a lot of seniors, there might be some on-site support, and really having the ability to just call downstairs or wherever it is and say, okay, I need this, and someone can come right away. Now, eventually though, individuals may need long-term care. And long-term care is where you're requiring 24 hours care. And this is where there's always somebody around. Your meals are provided, activities are there. There's physicians coming into the long-term care homes. And you're really, it's unsafe for the individual to be at home by themselves, so they're within the long-term care facility. And then finally, at Yi Hong, we also have something called hospice palliative care. And this is really where we support people to have their best last days. And the approach is very centered on comfort and ensuring that, the person has everything that they need in order to die the best way possible. And so this is something very different, I think, for many communities who don't often talk about death and dying, but it is a reality for all of us. And to really provide the most beautiful and healthy and dignified setting for the individual and their loved ones is truly what I believe we can do the best at. So I hope, Vanessa, that illustrates the continuum at a high level.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you. I know for me, like one of my biggest learning was that it's not just, everyone speaks about retirement homes in layman terms as referring to everything, but it's not that. And there's so many specific services that can meet you on, the spectrum of what your needs are. So thank you for that. Okay, I'll go over to Melody now. So Melody, you've obviously been in the senior space. You're the queen of the senior space because you're involved professionally, personally with, your family members, and then obviously philanthropically. So I think, as Next Gens, we're always interested in knowing, like, what change are you seeing? Like, how is the space different from where you started to now, and what are some of the future trends that you might be seeing that we should be at least aware of as we think about, our parents entering the senior space?
Sure. Thank you, Vanessa. So on a macro level, one of the things that hasn't changed is the seniors industry is a needs-driven based industry. So the majority of the seniors who would like to continue to live in their own homes and continue their full independence for as long as their health permits will continue to stay at home. But as a family member, or for even the seniors personally, in most cases, where you don't really start your research until something has changed from a health perspective, either physically or cognitively. And that affects the ability for you to live at home on your own, where it becomes challenging. And unfortunately, there are times when there's a major life event that occurs when a life partner of many years has passed away. That's when you actually start researching and looking into what senior options are there for your loved ones. The trends, if you take a look at what Statistics Canada has now published, the population, as most of us are seeing now, are growing, and the seniors population are living longer, and they require more access to services and for support. So since 1971, the population of seniors 75 years and older have increased from 2.9% to 7.4%. And then over the next 20 years, this trend is only going to continue to grow. We're expecting this group to grow by 4% every year, and will account for about 13.5% of the total population in 2040. That's not that far away. And in order to maintain the current level of inventory per capita that we have right now, the total supply that we needs to be doubled over the next 20 years in order to maintain that equilibrium. So as San shared with you earlier, the more care you need, the more far right you are in that spectrum of continuum of care towards long-term care and wait lists. And what I've seen over the past few years, even from personally, when my mom was accepted to Yihong, that was about 15 years ago, the wait list was about 3 years. Now the wait list, as you mentioned for Yihong, could be up to 10 years, whereas the average for Ontario is only about 152 days, but it's still 152 days too long for when someone really needs that care. So it really just goes back to that lack of supply that we're seeing right now in the industry. And then on the far left of the spectrum, if you're looking for a place where you want to live with a community of seniors, like a retirement home, or with seniors apartments with the basic care needs, without the responsibility and the headaches of home ownership, we're seeing more amenity space being built out. And as San mentioned, more flexibility and options. So that you can pick and choose from simple as the number of meals that you want in a day to the different care services that are offered that you require based on your needs. So it is really no longer a one model fits all. It's no longer one schedule, one specific care plan for every senior. Everyone has their own schedule and a very customized plan that really caters to their needs. In general, for this industry, I think everyone has seen a lot of change and a lot of awareness, especially because of the pandemic. The pandemic has exponentially really increased that awareness, and particularly the need for attention for the industry, more so on the funding side from the government for long-term care, and also the quality of people that provide the care to some of our society's most vulnerable. And if you talk to anyone in the industry, the biggest challenge that we're all facing right now is staffing. There is a shortage of people to hire for personal support workers, RPNs, nurses. And we need to think about how will our government support the seniors, but then also how will each individual community support its own community? So one of the things that we have noticed and recognize now that change needs to be made. So to the audience right now, for the specific next generation in this group, for those who are here who have an interest and are being proactive to learn more about seniors, I strongly encourage you to continue attending more seminars, learning more about the various levels of care, and to think about how you can make a difference in this industry, not just for your family, but as a volunteer or professionally in your capacity at work. How can we advocate to improve the system so that the most vulnerable population doesn't get affected the worst in a pandemic again? We're serving generations above us who are our parents, our grandparents, who have done so much for us. And I believe that there's a responsibility to ensure that we're taking care of them when they need our help the most, just like what they have done for us when we were young. It's a full circle of life.
Thanks, Mel. Okay, so I'm going to go to the left side of the spectrum. For the attendees on today's call who are fortunate to have parents who are currently healthy and active, and we talked about how people are staying healthy and active longer. If these attendees want to, understand how they can support their parents in staying healthy and active longer, Diane, can you speak to some of the community services that are out there for these seniors, and perhaps like how attendees can, we have some questions from the Q&A about like, where do I even go to learn about what services are out there? So yeah, if Diane, I'll pass it over to you for that question.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa. So I think, first of all, I'd like to commend everybody who's on this call today for being present here. If you're here and you're thinking about how to support your parents or other older adults in your life, this is a really great start to begin thinking now, and especially when people are still younger and healthier. As Melody mentioned, we tend to think about it when something happens and a need arises. And then sometimes we can be scrambling to find what's the right thing for my loved one. And San gave an excellent overview of what that entire continuum is of things that are available. And it does get a little bit more confusing as more help is needed. And so just starting with that left side of the spectrum, as we're calling it today, or if we're talking about younger seniors, I wanted to just touch on that for a moment, because as we already talked about, it's not necessarily chronological age. We all have a different story and a different journey through our aging process. One thing that we do know is that we all are going to age, and we'll slow down, our needs will increase, but it may happen at different points in life for each of us. And so for anybody, and especially for the people that you are wanting to support, starting when people are younger and healthier, is a great time to be thinking about what kind of support needs might there be in the future, and so what can I do now? So just some things like thinking about developing strong social connections. That could be through volunteering. There are many nonprofit charitable organizations that depend on volunteers, and we all have passions in different themes, different areas, and there's always an opportunity for volunteering that helps to keep people active and contributing to their communities and do things that they're passionate about, but also to be building friendships and relationships with other people. And that network becomes very important as we get older, because sometimes we need to be depending on other people for extra help. Exercise classes are also really important, getting involved in dance or Tai Chi or yoga. There are lots of different opportunities through various community organizations, through municipalities to get involved in different types of active classes. And many organizations also provide something called a Seniors Active Living Center. And those centers are distributed throughout the province of Ontario. They often include crafts and hobbies and arts and music, as well as more physical activities. So it's also a great way to meet other people and build some connections and relationships. So, for people that are looking for how can they maintain the health that they have, all of those things, addressing your mental and emotional health and your physical health, just keeping very well-rounded and holistic is a great way to do that. And I guess another thing I would add is that there are a number of classes just on health education. So if somebody has just had a diagnosis of diabetes, for example, there are courses that you can take that are offered by community organizations that teach people about how to manage their diet, how physical activity and other activities can support the impact or prevent the impacts of diabetes, just as one example. But there are similar education for other chronic diseases that people begin to develop as we age. So I know that there was another question about how to navigate different types of community services. I'm thinking maybe we can come back to that as we start to work through that continuum, because it's once we get into needing multiple services that question is a really pertinent question. Would that be okay?
Yeah, no, of course. And I do want to mention to people, like, we are kind of traveling along the continuum. I know that there's a lot of questions around long-term care and that whole process because of, being shocked and hearing like, how am I supposed to navigate a 10-year wait list if my parents need help tomorrow? So we will get there. I promise we'll save a lot of time to talk through that. But yeah, just staying on the beginning end of the spectrum, there was actually an audience question submitted in advance. And Diane, perhaps you're the best person to answer this one, where how have you seen programming change during the pandemic? Obviously, a lot of the adult day programs cannot take place in person, and seniors and Zoom, there's challenges around there. What are you seeing in terms of any new type of programming or things that have been successful during this COVID era?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And, like everybody, many seniors providing organizations have really done a tremendous amount of work over the past year to bring their programs and services online and make them available virtually. That is challenging for some older adults and seniors, either because they don't have the devices or they don't have the data, or because they are not accustomed to being online and navigating those services. So many organizations will also provide some coaching or some tech support to seniors to get online. There are some organizations also that on a short-term basis might be loaning out devices so that people can try it out and see if they like it. In terms of adult day programs, that's when we're starting to get into people moving along that continuum and developing some complex conditions or some frailty or cognitive decline. And And those programs are also available virtually through most adult day program providers. But again, it can be very challenging for some individuals to get online. Sometimes they need support of their caregiver to sit beside them and help them work through it so that they can connect with people they've already met, or to meet new people through those programs and get that therapeutic intervention that adult day programs offer. It's not the best solution for everybody, though. That's definitely true. Some people really need the in-person interventions, and that's been very challenging to do, and to do safely throughout the pandemic. There aren't any easy answers to that question right now. Some adult day program providers have started offering a mobile mode where they would come to the home and do some brief interventions at the home with the individual for as long as they can tolerate that. And so it really is graduated based on the particular needs of that individual and that family.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I fully answered your question, Vanessa. Was there more
Yeah,
to it?
no, that's great. But I will tell the attendees that I'm going to ask each of you to provide some resources that I can share with everyone who's registered after the call. So yeah, Diane, like, if you're referencing if there's any good like portals of information where people can just go and see, I'll circulate those resources after the call. Thanks. Okay, so yeah.
Can I just add to that, Vanessa? Is
Right.
that, I want to say is that, obviously we're all watching as to what's going to be happening with the pandemic, but it's very important, again, to be very individualized or personalized in terms of what the senior needs. And so at Yihong, safety is our utmost priority, but at the same time, we have started to open some of our adult day programs, but on a very limited numbers basis, is because we're wanting to, even though government might say, okay, you can do such and such, we're still being really vigilant to ensure the safety of your loved ones and family members, and also of the staff. So it really needs to be consideration as to what's best for the individual. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. So let's move up the spectrum to where seniors who are needing some support with, living. And so different housing options. San, this question is for you. So how are we supposed to know when a family member might benefit from moving to a seniors building or a type of facility? And I think, Melody might speak later about the different types of facility, but more just as a general, like what should people be looking for, and kind of like the trigger signs of, oh, maybe we should start thinking about other housing options?
Yeah, so again, there isn't a one size fits all. I think it's very much about what the senior wants, but also what family is able to support and provide as well. Because I think it's certainly in some cultures, there's a little bit of reticence to accepting help. And it's oftentimes, as Melody said, not until a major life event happens that you recognize that this situation can't continue for much longer. And so I think, some of the signs could be that, the individual is just not themselves anymore, right? They are showing some sort of decline. You may not necessarily know what it is, but it could be physical, just person is less mobile. Your mom and dad maybe is letting things go at the house. Isn't cleaning up as often. Maybe they're not taking care of themselves, putting off medical and dental appointments. Maybe they're saying, no, I don't need help all the time. And so the conversation begins early in terms of, supports. And it could be anything from just, buying a few groceries for them, or, coming over and helping to tidy up, just so that you can see and a little bit more about what's happening and start that conversation with your parents. And so it's really about not being I guess, afraid to ask and to kind of start that dialogue with your parents, and then starting to talk to them about the options, about what's available. Because I think there's some misperceptions that, oh, I need to be a certain way before I access these programs. Meanwhile, as Diane said, we're wanting to help people stay healthy and well, and to not have that decline. So if they're starting to, get quiet and just not really engaged in talking to you or talking to others, not wanting to go out anywhere, that might be, those might be some of the signs that you'd want to consider starting to have the dialogue.
Yes, a good plug for if anyone hasn't seen the recording of session 1, it's available on our NextGen website, but it's all about how life can you can make your lives easier by talking about things and asking your parents about their preferences before the need arises. Okay, so Diane, I wanted to ask you about what services are out there, both public, perhaps like public funded and private pay, for parents that have expressed like, I want to stay in my home for as long as possible, or like, I never want to leave my home. What can people do to get help there?
Okay, so the good news is that there are more and more options to help people to stay at home and to age in place, as we call it. And the health system is getting more and more focused on doing that, so that people can make that choice to stay at home if that's what they wish. And so there are more and more opportunities and different supports that can be provided in the home, and people don't need to go somewhere else or to live somewhere else to get those supports. So some just starting with some simple basic things. As you might notice that your family member is having difficulty with driving or not confident with driving any longer, there are transportation options to get to medical appointments and to get groceries. If you're getting concerned about people maybe not eating as well or not able to manage cooking as well, and then we get into some food security concerns, then Meals on Wheels is the name of a service where people can receive a hot meal delivered to their home every day, or they can receive a number of meals for the week that are frozen, that they could just be microwaved. Usually they are very nutritionally balanced. Many organizations use a dietitian to ensure that the meals are nutritious and appropriate for the individual and the type of conditions that they have. And
Is that something is that something you typically have to pay for, or is that like a public service?
Yes, so you could get that through a publicly funded organization or through a private pay company. I think there are more and more private pay companies that are popping up that do meal delivery, grocery delivery, ingredients for meals delivered that just need to be prepared easily. And then publicly funded organizations, they're not fully funded for providing that service. So there is always a fee, but it's not the full cost of the meal plus the delivery of the meal. And usually the staff are providing some kind of a friendly check to make sure that the person is doing okay at home. So if you're getting concerned about your family member that maybe they're not quite doing so well, there's somebody who would have eyes on them every day when they're dropping off that meal, ask them a few questions and develop a little bit of a friendly relationship with them, and then would be able to alert somebody if there's a concern starting to emerge. And then there are another range of other support services, and it's difficult to explain it because it is very complex. This is the not good news part, that it's still very difficult to navigate, even though there's more and more available to people at home. It's really difficult to know where to begin and how to find it. Some personal support services, like San had already described, personal care, personal hygiene, meal preparation, some help at home like homemaking. Those services can be available through what we used to call CCAC, Community Care Access Centers, which is now called Home and Community Care Support Services in Ontario. And the same services are available through publicly funded community organizations and from private pay companies. There are multiple options depending on what you prefer. Usually with private pay companies, there's a little bit more flexibility to choose the time and how the scheduling works. But that's not necessarily always the case either. Many publicly funded organizations can do it too.
And who can be, everyone on this call right now, like everyone presumably is busy. They've got kids, they've got jobs. Like, who is there a first point of contact? Like, someone asked, should we be reaching out to social workers for advice? And does that come from a physician's referral? Like, if I am overwhelmed because my parents have all these needs, who can I call? Or do I just need to spend 30 hours in front of Google?
It is a difficult question to answer still. There is not one centralized place to get that information. Sometimes the starting point is home and community care services. And if they're not able to provide the service, they'll do a quick assessment and then they'll provide a referral to another organization. Your family physician or primary care provider is also a good place to start. They can provide referrals. And there are many community-based organizations like EHON, like Senior Persons Living Connected, that also are a good place to start. So for example, in my organization, we have a central person that you can speak to, and they would do a quick evaluation of what the person needs and then provide referrals to the right type of services. And also encourage people to be connecting with their primary care provider around that. So, and San, I think you wanted to add something, did you?
No, I want to say exactly what you did, Diane, is that, of course, they could call any agency, I think. We all try to help each other. And so, for example, if Yihong doesn't have that service, we would refer you to Diane's organization or vice versa. And we really want to work together is because we recognize that that's the most challenging thing. But certainly, like as Diane's organization, we have a hotline that you can call just to get some basic information because it is daunting. And I think that's one thing is, doing a whole bunch of internet research is going to maybe make it even more confusing versus having someone live to talk to and maybe in language of choice as well. And cultural preferences and all of that is really helpful to have that dialogue instead of just kind of doing a research study, right, on what's online, because there's many nuances, as Diane mentioned, and those aren't always apparent on websites.
Okay, thank you. If we have time in the end, I'll come back to just some more audience questions on this topic, but I'll move on to Melody. And so as I mentioned, before I was involved in this, I didn't know, like, for example, there was a difference between retirement homes and long-term care homes. And I feel like it's become like a conversation starter now for me. I'm like, do you know the difference between retirement and long-term care? So can you explain to people, like, what are the different housing options, and particularly, like, what are the differences in costs, and which ones do you own and which one do you lease? Can you just map out that landscape for us?
Sure, no problem. So San has actually mapped out at a very high level all the different spectrums of the continuum of care. Where there are a bit more options in the middle of the continuum of care is when people hear about retirement home versus long-term care. And then obviously there's the before in the community and at the very far right with the palliative care. But in the middle, I guess the easiest way to think about it is both options offer accommodation. Right. And the long-term care, depending on where you live, which province, is subsidized by the government. So in Ontario, a big portion of the long-term care is subsidized by the government. And so the cost of long-term care is not as expensive or as heavy compared to retirement home, depending on where you are in the retirement home spectrum. In the retirement home spectrum, there are options from independent living, independent supportive living, then there's assisted living and memory care. So if you think about it based on what for a next gen, I think the easiest to relate to is if you're renting a multifamily. You just need the accommodations, you need a room to stay, it could be a 1-bedroom, and you just pay for the rent. So with the retirement concept, that's the same thing. You pay for the rent, but as you move through that continuum of care, you can add on more services. You can add on more care. It could be 1 meal, 2 meals, 3 meals. It could be all the snacks included. It could be, do you need help with feeding? Do you need help with bathing? Do you need help with your medications? And it really then, between assisted living and memory care, it's the difference between physical needs and cognitive needs. So with assisted living, it's, do you need someone to help you get out of bed? 1 person transfer? Do you need 2 people to help you get out of bed? 2 people transfer? Or are you in a wheelchair? And depending on that community, that retirement home, they serve different needs and different seniors, depending on physically where you are in your stage. And then from a cognitive perspective, from a memory care, that's when you start seeing your loved ones maybe being more forgetful. Maybe they're not able to find their way home, or they get lost driving, or they get lost on their bus. So that's when you actually need to look into these facilities to help protect them, to keep them safe in a secured location. So I guess when you think about it, retirement home versus long-term care offers 24/7 nursing care, and it's majority funded by the government. So when we go into looking at costs, I'm gonna quote from a study done by Cushman and Wakefield, one of the experts in the seniors housing space. They looked at the average cost across Canada, and just to give you an idea what they are, because at the end of the day, it's like cars. They can range anywhere from an affordable car to somewhere mid-scale to somewhere higher end in the retirement space. And it's going to be different for based on your location, your market, where you are in each province. But if you look at the seniors apartment space, it could be on average a 1-bedroom around $2,700. And that's really just the accommodations with no care provided at all. When you get into independent living, it could range on an average around $4,500, and it could include, very basic with, 1 or 2 meals, some light housekeeping, and some laundry. When you get into assisted living, that's when the costs could continue to increase, and it could range up to $6,000 plus. And that's because it really is dependent on if you need those services like the medications or like the bathing. And when you get into memory care, those can range even further with $7,000 plus. And that's because, do you need someone to really monitor you even more frequently? Do you need even more care required? And when you get into long-term care, when you look, and this is a chart that we can share with you, Vanessa, that you can share with all your members, is in some of the publication, it'll quote, $6,400 for long-term care. But that's because it's the cost of what it would cost in total. But because it's subsidized by the government, the individual, the senior, actually doesn't pay that amount. It's set, actually for Ontario, it's set between, if you're in a semi-private room versus a private room, what those rates look like. And it could be anywhere between $2,500 to $2,700, under $3,000, depending on the year that you're eligible for. And it will be also dependent on your income. So for all those options between retirement, which I mentioned with the independent living, to assisted living, memory care, to long-term care, those are all rental options. Where there is an option to own, and we didn't mention this yet, but I'll bring it up because I think some people might have heard of life leases. So life leases is a subset of this category where you are actually still in a community, usually a 55 plus. And the average age could be, closer to 80, but it's almost like your own condo where the right to occupy in the leasehold is with a certain organization so that they can control who actually lives there. So if you're a next gen, if you're a member of next gen, you're in your young 30s or 40s, and you would like to purchase with your, loved ones, for your grandparents, you can actually purchase one of these life leases for them under your name. But as long as it's someone that's 55 plus or older living in there, that's what they stipulate, so that they can control who's in that community. So that's the ownership option, and the rest of them are rental options. But as I mentioned before, from a cost perspective, it really is dependent on what your needs are and what you're looking for, because it can be as affordable as you're looking for or as high end as you're looking for.
Great, thank you. Sam, did you want to
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and maybe Melody could speak to this as well, is around affordable housing options. So there are also opportunities where there's subsidized housing for seniors who have lower income. And so there's, processes to apply for that. So because not every senior can afford, the kinds of fees for retirement home or even long-term care. So there's really, different approaches through government that you can apply to as well.
So I think one of the best resources for that would probably be CMHC, because they are encouraging more and more affordable housing. So you'll see a lot of resources and a lot of articles that are published by them in terms of really encouraging developers to build out affordable housing, and which are subsidized by the government, that you can apply for.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that as well. Just going back to Melody mentioned at the top that the number of seniors that is growing and growing, and the government is recognizing that as well. And so, as you're saying, CMHC is beginning to invest more in new seniors housing units. But also, if you're looking for subsidized rental housing for for seniors or for anybody. In Toronto, you can go through Housing Connections, and that is unfortunately a long wait list, but it is a good opportunity if you think that subsidized housing is going to be necessary. And sometimes within those housing environments, there are supports available to the people who live in those buildings. So for example, my organization runs a supportive, a subsidized housing building where we provide a supportive housing service, which means personal care and homemaking coming into people's homes. So sometimes you can look at that as an option.
Okay, we are getting so many questions, which is great, but I'm also sensing some fear in people. So hopefully in the next 30 minutes, we can try and appease those fears and just provide some confidence. Okay, one question that comes up is, and I think, San, I'm going to direct this to you, is talk to us about this crazy wait list process. When do people need to get on a wait list? What's the organization that's the gatekeeper? And like in terms of ranking, you can speak to how people have to rank. Like what happens if a place comes up, but you're not ready for it? Do you get to pass on to the next one? Just that whole navigating of the LTC options.
Yeah, absolutely. And so maybe I'll speak at a broader perspective first, and then I'll get down to the specifics, is that I'm really hoping that the Next Gen membership can help us with advocating funders and government and everybody for more care and more options, and all of which we're talking about today. And because there is not enough. And as Melody said, with the statistics, no matter how fast we build new long-term care homes and retirement homes, I still believe that there won't be enough to meet everybody's needs. And so, yes, this wait list at Yi Hong has always been this way. It's because people really want to come here, and there's thousands of people on the wait list. And so even for myself, I think maybe I should put myself on the wait list right now because 20, 30 years I might need it. But the reality is that it doesn't work that way. We can't just kind of call up Yi Hong and say, okay, please put my grandparent or my mom and dad on the wait list. There needs to be an assessment. And as Diane mentioned, it's right now it's home and community support services, where they need to look at all of the abilities of the senior, physical, mental, social, cognitive, all of that, and do an assessment. Because in talking about the continuum of options, you can see is that that's pretty much on the far right of the continuum. And so because there's so many people waiting and so frail, it's really needing to ensure that your loved one is also meeting those criteria. And so it is very challenging. It is scary because it can be very tiring as well for family members to support their parents or grandparents around the clock. And we often see a decline in the husband or wife as well, is because they're just doing everything they can all the time. And so I would say that, what do we do about it is, when it gets to the point where your loved one needs it, then there will be, a referral from either the hospital or from the doctor or from, wherever they are, is that they will be referred to home and community support services. They will come in and do an assessment, and then they will ask you about your preferences. And so, of course, culturally appropriate care, or, just having flexibility and options, location, all of that is taken into consideration in addition to, some of the specific medical or clinical needs. And you can put your loved one on multiple wait lists. And the process is whereby the long-term care home will, receive requests for placements in their homes. And then we in turn also assess whether this is the most appropriate place, the most safe place, because not all homes are equipped with the same types of staff and supports and all of that. But we all do our best because we recognize how challenging it is, and we will accept individuals into our homes. Now, if you're on the wait list for up to 10 years, it really is the case where you need to build a system of supports around yourselves. And not only looking at yourself, but your family members, looking at friends, tapping into volunteer programs and accessing all of those services that Diane and myself have mentioned. You really want to have that wraparound care. And so one of the things that Yi Hong is doing, and many others as well, is that we do have government funded home support services, but we've also been providing private home support services, is because individuals are able and willing to pay for those. And so you'll see, many of these services across the community. And there's nothing wrong with accessing these services, but you do want to obviously, ensure that they work well for your loved ones. So it really is about being proactive, I think, as we've discussed today, and not waiting until the last minute, because you want to prevent and you want to mitigate risk. You don't want to get to the point where your grandparent or loved one has a fall and then, has something serious happen in their home and whatnot. So you want to really, look at how to move along the continuum with your loved one.
Okay, thank you. And just back to some of the kind of specific questions on, actually, I first want to just reiterate to people that what we're talking about with wait lists and such is, and correct me if I'm wrong, panelists, more focused on like the long-term care. And if you want a retirement, which is actually all privately paid, if you want a retirement option, generally you can call up places and there isn't that crazy waitlist situation where you need to be assessed, all that. It's a lot more like you can find supply for your demand. Is that fair to say, Melody?
Yeah, so you'll still need to be assessed because each home can cater to different needs. But for some homes, there are no wait lists. Right? So you could get that care provided and that safety accommodation quickly, but then you would have to pay for it for a lot more than if you really needed long-term care, which then the retirement homes won't be the right place for you because it wouldn't be offering 24/7 nursing care. And that's where it is privately government subsidized.
Mm-hmm. And just to be clear too, to people, long-term care can also be the wrong place for your parents because I've seen it firsthand with, an old woman that I've become friends with. She doesn't have the financial resources to be in retirement. So she is in long-term care, and she's surrounded by people that are much further along, in terms of their dementia needs or anything. And so it's actually quite sad because she should be in a place where she's around people that are more social and like her. So just don't want to cause any confusion there. Is just because long-term care is government funded and provide more support, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily the best option for a loved one. Okay, so I'm going to just go through some questions that we have with the few minutes left. somebody asked if someone doesn't like, so they said, I'm nervous about signing my mother into a senior's home. What if she does not like it after a year or two? With the wait list and low supply, it's hard. Is it hard to try various places and to find a great fit for her? So I guess if someone has been admitted into a long-term care spot, how easy is it to say, I don't like this and get back on the list? You have to then wait again.
Yeah, so I don't know the very specific, features around this process, but I don't think you just end up back on the wait list and then you got to wait another X years. I think it is that, there would be inter-home transfers because the person has been recognized as requiring services. So I don't think it's as simple as that, but in terms of, all the nuances around, how that actually works and the details is that, that would be need to be discussed with a particular long-term care home.
So one of the things I think we should touch upon is respite care that we haven't mentioned. So in terms of if you don't like that home or if you don't know enough about that home, there are options to try out either the retirement home or if you need respite care, even in long-term care. If either the caregiver is burnt out or you just need a few days because they just did a surgery and they can't do anything on their own independently, there are respite care options. So let's say for a retirement home, you can call up a retirement home and say, I need a short-term stay. And it could be as simple as a few days or up to, as long as you want before you make a commitment of a full lease. Right. And same thing with long-term care. There are respite options within long-term care as well, so that you can actually get a sense of what that would be like, especially when it's early on in the process where they don't need the 24/7-hour care, where it's early on in the retirement phase, you can actually educate and get a sense early on before you have that time pressure. So I think what I would love to encourage everyone is the stress is because of that time pressure, is because when something bad happens and you can't predict it and you don't know what to do at that point. But you guys are also proactive right now in joining the session that if you have the opportunity, go to tours. That's probably the best way to get a sense of is if that home is the right home, either be it if they're still very independent, they need retirement home, or if it is long-term care and you have to figure out what list to put them on the wait list. You can call up the social workers at each of the homes in the communities. There are marketing and leasing agents that can offer you the tours. There are open houses to visit the place. And there are also community events, right? So like San knows with Yihong, they offer a lot of community events inside a Yihong facility where you can go and do a Tai Chi class, right? Outside of COVID world. You can go and listen to seminars. And that's the best way to get yourself familiar with that home first, right? So that you can have those conversations with your loved ones and say, okay, do you want to learn more? Because even with my own retirement portfolio, we have clients that have called us 7 years ago, came to an open house and has followed up every year, and they didn't move in until 7 years later. So it is that relationship that you can continue to learn and build up with your loved ones, with your families, to figure out exactly what that best place could be, because it's really been dependent on, just like when you're looking for your first home, the neighborhood, the amenities, the staff, the management. You need to be comfortable with all that, because every single community, every single home, be it retirement home or long-term care, has their own culture.
Okay, so I wish we could keep going, but I know we only have 2 minutes left. So I'm gonna just ask again, San, Diane, and Melody, if you can share just a few key resources with us, that putting yourselves in the in NextGen's shoes of like, where is the best place to get information. San, we did share the Yihong hotline number last time, which I think is great for people. And so I'll share those resources with people after. But I guess last question, are you guys seeing private consultants popping up as being that first phone call, who I could call, someone is an experienced person in the area and can just help basically suggest the different options and where to begin? I would imagine that those businesses will be very lucrative in the future. Are you seeing more of those?
I'm seeing a lot of them, especially in the retirement home space. And they can be agencies specific to a specific neighborhood or an agency specific to a certain care type, be it memory care. So let's say if your loved one is having cognitive issues and they're looking for memory care, there are specialized agencies that look for specific memory care communities. But if you're looking for a specific neighborhood, there are also agencies that will look for you, and it's almost like you go to your realtor and you say, here are all my ideal choices, here are all the things I'm looking for, and they'll be able to help match you up and set up the tours for you.
Okay. All right. On that note, I'll end this conversation. I know probably so many people want to keep going, but please, if there's any burning questions that you don't feel like were answered today, email the YH NextGen address and we'll try and get some answers to you. Thank you again, San and Diane and Mel, for your time. This was very valuable. I hope that people feel the same way, and have a great day, everyone. I look forward to seeing everyone for session 3 in September. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.